little Zoom computer nightmares here.
Okay, we're good. So let's get you. You sent us a graphics package, and I know there's another one that was sent today, but the one that said conference realignment impact look back.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I had to reboot the computer and everything here.
That's okay.
So one of the things I thought was kind of interesting, that I thought you and your audience would find interesting, is looking at conference realignment and thinking about who got the bids and who didn't. There was a university study that came to the conclusion that I think is wrong, that what conference you're in and changing conferences doesn't help you as a school. And what I found in doing a lot of research and a lot of data is that is very much not correct. And what I think actually the thing is it's not just a question of like, did you change conferences? It's a question of, did you make an upgrade? Like, if you want to think of it in a better way, like to hang with the cool kids. Like, how do you get as an organization? Because there's two levels. There's the sports level and then the organizational level. And in both of them, you want to elevate your university to be as good as you can. And when they look at realignment, they failed to do this. And there's a couple like phenomenal examples of schools that I think are really interesting to look at and think about, that we have not really paid enough attention to. And the data, when they look at them, some of these academic studies are actually wrong. So I'm going to share right now. I think I can get this screen. It's actually Armstrong. It says host participant is disabled screen sharing. So whoever can just let me do that real quick, I'll pop that up. So what I kind of did is looked at with some of the past examples of historical realignment, like who got in and who didn't. So we'll take a look in just a second at like the huge drama that happened. I don't know if you guys really know very much about, which your viewers would find fascinating, the massive disaster when they created the Pac-12 in the 1950s. Amazing, massive sports drama. And can you guys see that now?
Yeah, we can see it. Script. There we go. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
And so anyway, when they created that, for example, they banished Oregon and Oregon State and Washington State to die alone in the woods, and they almost left them there. In which case they would have ended up in maybe the WAC, possibly the Big Sky. And like, think about how different it would be today. I mean, Kirk Schultz wouldn't be at Washington State if they were in the Big Sky. And so some of those are kind of interesting. So what I kind of looked at, and this kind of goes to some of the stuff we looked at before, I call it the big league conferences. I'm generalizing. It's sort of like the A5 and sort of their precedents, including the Southwest Conference, the Pacific Coast Conference, which is not the Pac-12. They try to pretend it is, but it's not. And then the Eastern Conference, which is another like thing that a lot of your readers I think would find fascinating. And you see the little explosions. They've blown up a couple times. So the first one I thought was interesting was thinking about like winners versus losers, like who got bids and who didn't. And there's a phenomenal book called What If that looks at some of these that a guy wrote. He's a really great columnist. But I mean, if you think about it, where some of these places were when they got their bids. So like think about Utah. And I'm sorry, they're doing some construction near us. Utah actually very much engineered their Pac-12 bid when they did that in 2010. That's another fascinating story, but they were not that much different than Colorado State. Today, they're in the AAU and, a hugely respected institution. Michigan State, when they got their Big Ten bid, helped catapult them into 6 national championships and AAU membership. The big thing is what we find is that a lot of these schools that wanted the AAU memberships and the R1s got that really sort of by being in with the universities that did. Mm-hmm. So if you think about Oregon State and Washington State, Arizona State again, these are all schools that came into expansion in the Pac in the 60s and 70s. There wasn't that much difference in the 60s between the New Mexico schools and the Oregon schools. And in fact, the Oregon schools were hated much more as being anti-sports. The Oregon schools were opposed to big-time sports in the 60s. In the 50s and 60s. It's why they blew up the Pac-12. They weren't that much different than New Mexico and Mexico State. Look at where they are now. I mean, Oregon, hugely advantageous to them academically and athletically. The big one is Washington State and Idaho. Washington State and Idaho are what, 6 or 7 miles apart. They're right across the border, right there, both on the border together. They've been like rivals and best friends. I think they're closer than USC and UCLA. They were both in the conference together up until they both got expelled or sort of, thrown in the blowout. And the difference is huge. I mean, Washington State is a much more global, much more successful university because of that. What's really interesting as well is the Arizona schools. When you look at them, Arizona and Arizona State did not want to join the pack. They got pushed by the Arizona schools, and their regions forced them into it. And today, President Crow is like, it's the best thing that ever happened to our school. Danny White agrees as well. And the really interesting one, Stanford was in a huge huff when they were forming the conference, and it would have gone to San Jose State probably if Stanford had not said yes at the very last minute. Stanford's athletics obviously thrived in the Pac-12. This is, we talk a little bit about realignment.
I love that. God, the way you could do this.
You guys covering the realignment of the Pacific Coast.
Yes. Back in the day. Yeah.
Whatever happened, just remember, what's happening today is nice and easy in comparison to what happened before. So the other thing I thought was really interesting, too, is taking a look at schools. And by the way, there's a lot of data that goes behind this. I just sort of simplified it here because it's easier to see, just sort of look at the logos. But, to think about cast-offs, like teams that everybody got, that left a big league conference and then came back. How did the organizations really succeed? TCU has thrived in the last decade or so. And SMU has done very well, too, but not at the same acceleration rate. You see the same thing, Louisville and Memphis. Houston, their president has them on a rocket ship. And Rice is one of the best schools in the world. What are they, number 17 in the country? Mm-hmm. But they haven't really, rocketed, done anything groundbreaking since then. It just very much seems to me that when we look at this, being in a big time conference that puts you with those institutions you want to be around propels you no matter what. South Carolina and Sewanee, of course, is always the easy joke. The University of the South. They were an SEC game. Alabama at Sewanee was a conference game. What really you think about like Sewanee and Vanderbilt? Like, what's the difference between them back in 1940? Not much. How much advantageous was it for Vanderbilt to be part of the conference that they're in? And then Tulane and they just in Georgia Tech. Tulane blew it in leading the SEC. Today, Tulane's in a wonderful, phenomenal school, but think about really just like what another level I think they would be on if they hadn't left. This is sort of a little kind of joke for you guys as well. If you were covering the Oregon schools back in the day when they were sort of exiled, so those schools were cast off, banished from sports until, I don't know if you guys know this, but 7 of the 9 Pacific Coast Conference CEOs, presidents and chancellors, were fired or forced out or retired after their big scandal. Just a massive disaster of a scandal. And it wasn't until everyone from their administrations was gone that they were allowed into the new conference and have thrived since then. Now, this is one I think is really interesting. So this is